Hey guys, this is Coach Adrian from Blitz Kids, and today we're going to be going over Game of the Week. I actually just finished playing this game. It was a 5-3, so it was another kind of like Blitz game. Wasn't like super long time controls, so this is going to be pretty much short and sweet. I think it's like 20 moves long, so we got a miniature. All right. So, anyways, uh, white plays pawn to e4. I'm playing the white pieces. My opponent is playing the black pieces. And after pawn to e5, knight f3, we have knight to f6. So this is actually pretty interesting. Um, the idea is if knight takes e5, eventually black is going to play knight takes e4, and we're going to have open e-files. And with that said, we're probably going to have to castle quick. So these types of games can get pretty tactical. And so what I really opt to choose for is d4, just to offer a little bit more options in the opening. If I play knight takes e4, then the line goes d6, knight f3, and now knight takes e4. And then here I can choose like d3, d4, or even knight to c3. These are all playable options. And here, after d4, we can have, let me turn off the volume real quick. We could have knight takes or e takes. The idea is I give my opponent an opportunity to lose a lot of tempo in the opening with e takes d4. So now after pawn to e5, he jumps in the middle, right? But now I have, boom, queen takes d4, and this attacks the knight and still maintains pressure on this d5 square, and my pawn has advanced as well. So we can see that I gained a couple of tempos here. And the best reaction, I believe, is like pawn to d5 after e takes d6, knight takes d6. And this knight is actually pretty useful. We can all admit it does look pretty odd, but this knight does take away some squares, like away from the bishop. The bishop can no longer check or pin the knight to the king whenever this goes here. Let me highlight his options in red. Okay, so like if bishop to b5, I mean just knight takes b5. Also, it does protect like the f7 square, so it really negates this bishop from doing anything really harmful. And especially if it goes to like c4, you could just chomp it right off. Another thing, it does guard e4. It's a very important central square. Maybe I can even contest the bishop if it goes to d3. I can contest it with bishop to f5. So this bishop is really nullified whenever the knight is on d6. That's definitely something that I have noticed. And since my queen is on d4, my opponent's going to be able to challenge it with knight to c6 without any worry of this bishop pin. And so the queen may very well find itself moving again for the second time. And so the whole idea is that whoever utilizes the E and D files as quickly as possible and develops their pieces and castles quick will pretty much win the game and dominate for a long time because they'll have the initiative. So going back, my opponent didn't opt for this. He decided to play after d4, knight takes e4, and after knight takes e4, there are two lines. I do believe this is a line, and one of my special tricks that I like to play in that one is bishop to c4 with the idea of queen to d5, and that gets very sharp because your opponent has to play like a f5 move and know exactly what he's doing. He can very well get into trouble if he doesn't. Like, for example, I'll give just like one random move for black, and then it's like pretty much game all over. So after something like a6, you can play something like bishop to c4. And now something like bishop to c5 aiming at this, then queen to d5 just attacks the knight, attacks the bishop, and threatens mate here. So now if queen to e7, then yeah, actually, you know what? This is going back. I'm sorry. That's not the exact move. So now if, again, we have a6, bishop to c4. For example, if bishop to c5, well, actually, we could just play bishop takes f7, and after king takes f7, queen to d5 check, king to e8, and then now queen takes e4. So that's more of accurate play because that actually comes with checks. It's a little bit more forceful. While if we play like queen d5 right away, this isn't bad, but I do believe queen e7. Well, queen e7 might not work because we still have queen takes e4. So we would have to go into bishop takes f2, and after something as simple as king to e2. Now, well, black has problems. How do you survive this onslaught over here? Like if queen e7 to protect, now I play queen takes e4, and then the bishop is dropping. If I go and I protect against, move this knight out of the way, well, for example, we won't even have to go for the bishop. We can play bishop takes g5, and then we win the queen, because after something like queen takes g5, we have queen takes f7 again, king d8, and then of course knight takes g5. So the queen is just trapped, and if something like f6, well, queen f7, and there's like pretty much nothing else. You're dropping like 1, 2, 3 pieces or getting mated, so it gets disastrous very quickly. So that is a line. But the main thing that I played here was knight takes e5, because this is something that I've been recently practicing. So after knight takes e5, this is very playable. My opponent wasn't supposed to play queen f6 because it looks a bit odd. So I decided to go into a line queen e2, and after something like pawn to d5, which he played, cementing his knight, the one thing that he always has to worry about is this f3 move. Now, I knew this wasn't the best move, but I knew it was tricky, or my opponent can fall into some traps, which he did, if I play f3 right away. So f3 is just an equalizing move. So that's something that I also want to know, is that if you are playing like tricks, like let's say you have a clear, strategical, good move to play that. Or if you have a tricky one, you can only play it if it still has good sound, if it's still playing good sound principles, to help you later on with the strategy. Because what happens if your opponent does not fall into the trap? Okay, you do not want to play traps that take away from your strategy. Okay, so I wanted it to be a little bit spicy, so I actually did mix up the game by playing f3, but I knew that this was just going to be an equal game if he goes through all of the tricks and traps, right? So I play f3 right away. Now, it is worth noting that knight to c3 is a good move, and also knight to d2 as well, with the idea of, okay, like, I don't want to double up my structure, but knight to c3 is like even a little bit more wild because this bishop still is reserved. But maybe knight d2 is the best move here. And if, you know, knight takes d2, I mean, you got to be careful of this discovery attack. Okay, so pawn to f3 was played. And I was provoking my opponent to play what he did play, which is queen h4, and that is the best move. But he has to realize that now after g3, what does he play here? Like if he backs off with his knight, I take his queen. If he backs off with his queen, then I take his knight. So he has to go all in with knight takes g3. The idea is that he's forking these two pieces, and then he also has a discovery attack, which is extremely dangerous. Now, the best move for me here is to play h takes g3, which I did play that. However, it's worth noting that some of the other tries. So, for example, maybe some of you guys are thinking, well, why not just queen f2? Doesn't that pin to win? Well, this was something that I at least considered to see if it worked, but after knight to f5, this just seems like a very simple response. And now my queen is off the e-file. I don't have a discovery attack to win the queen or the rook. So here, I just have to play queen takes h4, and after knight takes h4, black is up a clean pawn, and this is gonna be troublesome for me. So going back, another try that I was thinking of was knight to g6, discover check, and I'm going to win the queen, right? But wait a minute, the knight has pressure here on e2, so after knight takes e2, check, I have to play knight takes h4, and now he can play knight takes d4, threatening the fork here, and then I'm going to be completely obliterated here. He's up 2 pawns, he's going to have pressure on c2. This is just really good for him. So I didn't want to play that. So instead I played h takes g3 here, which now he wins the rook, but look at this, knight to g6, discovery attack, hitting the rook and attacking the king. When the king moves out of the way to d8, now I can play knight takes h8, and now I'm also threatening knight takes f7, which I did think that my opponent was going to play queen to h5 and just protect that way, but he played maybe even slightly better with bishop to e6. Now here, my best move is bishop to e3 and just continue with development, protecting the d4 square and getting ready to castle queenside. I decided to play bishop to g5 check, which again is a bit tricky, but it also develops my piece. With the idea of if f6, now I can play queen takes e6 and threaten knight to f7 mate. So he can't even capture here because knight to f7 mate. And then I thought, well, if he plays bishop to e7, then bishop takes e7 check would win. And then now knight to c3. And this was my whole idea, just to develop with attacks. Now, looking at it now, there is actually a stunner move here in this position. I wonder if anybody can find it. Go ahead and pause your videos and see if you can find a really killer move here. Alright, so this move I actually missed, and that is knight takes f7. With the idea if bishop takes f7, now boom, queen takes e7, king to c8, queen to d8, checkmate, lights out, game over. So this is something that I did miss, and if he doesn't capture, well, this is coming next. So he has to play king to d7, right? And now I can probably play just, I want to play bishop takes e7 and then follow it up with knight to g5. But, I mean, just this position period is really, really nice. So there's lots of moves there. So I played bishop takes e7, which is also a good alternative. And after king takes e7, I played knight to c3, following up with my idea and getting ready to castle. Now, my opponent played knight to c6. Can anybody guess why my opponent played this move? Is this a very forceful move? Well, yes, it does come with some threats. The main idea is that he's putting pressure on d4 while at the same time attacking my knight on h8. So I decided to castle queenside, and my opponent played queen h6 check to kind of get his queen out of the corner and back into the game, which after I played king to b1, and then he played rook takes h8, which I knew that I was going to sacrifice my knight. I wanted to do a desperado, but at the same time, by forcing him to play rook takes h8, I get one additional tempo to still go and drive my attack home. So I really wanted to force him to waste that tempo with his rook to swing and capture that knight while I hurry up, castle, get to safety. And this check, yes, he got his queen into play, but now my king is especially safe. And so here now, I'm able to play a nice little move. If you want to pause your video, go ahead and try to figure it out. But it's simple. I just followed up with my plan. Knight takes d5 is the move. And basically, the bishop is pinned by the queen. So now the king moved to d6 centralized. And this is something that I was really curious about, but I didn't think it was necessary in the game, so I actually didn't play it. But I was calculating queen to e5 check, and even though it seems silly, remember you have to calculate all of your forcing moves. So I did take a bit of time here. And after queen to e5, I'm actually going to leave it up to you guys to see if this works out or if it doesn't work out. Okay, so I'm not going to explore that. I want you guys to calculate that and use that as an exercise to see if that actually does work or does not work. All right, so now I played knight to f4. And the idea was now I'm just going to play pawn to d5, relocate my knight because it was in danger. So it's kind of like a counter attack and getting my pieces to safety. And I'm also putting pressure here. Now my opponent plays a really interesting move here, rook to e8. And I think this was the bad move that he, wasn't supposed to play. So if you can see the best move here, and this is the killer move, this is pretty much game over, there's no coming back from this move. Go ahead and pause your videos to see if you can find it. Alright, here I played simply d5. The idea that my opponent, I believe he was hoping that I play this so he can discover attack on my queen with something like bishop takes d5, but I think he missed maybe rook takes d5. So in the game, oh, and this is checkmate, by the way. That's checkmate. So in the game, he played bishop to d7, but then also I have this discover attack. So yes, he's discover attacking me, but I can play my discover attack with check. And here, it's just a checkmate in 2. He has to play king takes c6, which he does. And now, checkmate in 1. Pause your video, see if you can find it. Alright, the answer is queen to b5. Checkmate. The rook is guarding these 2 squares. The queen is attacking here and protected by the bishop on f1. So the bishop did help in this game. Now, going back here, I believe after d takes c6, the only other move he had was king to c5, which then I still play the same thing. And yeah, that's checkmate. I wonder if there is any other checkmates in this position. Maybe rook to d5? No, he has king to b6. But yeah, so there's a lot of creativity going on here, and I ended up checkmating my opponent in the middle of the board here. He was in front of his pawns, and that's pretty much game over. So I really hope you guys learned something. Some key tips here is you are allowed to play a trap if it continues to go with a good strategy. If it will hurt your position, then don't play the trap. Another thing that you can do is whenever your opponent is on the run with the king, you want to get all of your pieces into the attack. That's something that wasn't necessarily shown here, but I kept up the momentum with the pieces that I did have in the attack. So like my knight going to f4, preparing d5. Let me just show that one last time. Right here, my knight goes to f4. Yes, I am retreating because now he's counterattacking here, but I keep up the gas. I keep up the momentum by playing my knight back to f4, getting him out of danger, but also threatening this d5 move, and my opponent just apparently missed it, and that was pretty much game over. Now, what he should have played in this position, I really don't know, because his king is like really bad. So he has to watch out for this. This is a primary threat. I do believe that if he was going to move the knight, then I was going to play queen e5 check. So I think that's why the position is a little bit more difficult than usual. So like for example, if here, I was just going to play here, check, king to d7, and I was probably going to play this anyway. And then the bishop would have been really short on squares. So I'm not too sure. Let's see. I almost want to go with the computer. What is the best move here? And this is where I can learn myself. So let's see. Best move for black is, I was thinking bishop to d7. But I mean, it just doesn't do anything. Now it's saying bishop to c8. I would not think of bishop to c8. Knight to d8. Yeah, and again, queen e5 check is just killer move. It's just game over, and then d5 anyway. Okay, so I hope everybody learned something and use those pro tips to achieve your goal, which is winning. Peace.